So the submitted question today, Marguerite, is my father recently passed and had a trust and will, but after a 23andMe swab, it turns out I have another sibling.
Oh.
I never met that person and they are not in Dad's will. Do I have a need to include them legally?
Did you plan for this, or did you miss when life demands answers you can't dismiss? Will you be ready when the trumpet blows? Do you have the blueprint for life's unknown?
Welcome back to Plan for This, real people, real estates, and real solutions. Today, we're going to be discussing Myra and Peter, and this is a case that will resonate with many throughout the United States and beyond. It's that classic case where all of a sudden you have an unknown guest, an unknown family member that comes back to live with you or decides to come and move in with you for a couple of weeks. Marguerite, this is packed with a lot of content, so I'm going to ask you to read the case study for the audience.
Okay, will do. Overstayed or welcome. Myra, 81, has lived alone for a long time. After her husband Walter died 10 years ago, she withdrew from life a little at a time until now she only interacts with her one neighbor, Beth, if they see each other taking the trash cans to the street. She has no pets, no living siblings, and no children. She has hundreds of books and reads for hours every day. Myra's sole nephew, Peter, who always sent an annual Christmas card, arrived out of the blue on Myra's front walk with a suitcase. His wife had thrown him out, and he couldn't think of anywhere else to go. Myra said Peter could stay 2 weeks when he showed up, but it has now been 2 months. She likes him, and he's very helpful. So far, he has bought his own groceries, but he hasn't offered any rent. He drives her old car occasionally. She said she thinks he may be her only living relative. She doesn't feel taken advantage of, but she feels wary. She's heard about family muscling in and asked Peter what his plan was. He only said, "I'm figuring it out," but spends all his time at the house on his laptop computer and doesn't appear to have any job prospects. Walter didn't like lawyers, and he had written his own will. Myra still has the original. Myra doesn't have an estate plan, and it is likely that Walter's name is still on the accounts and the house title. She knows she needs help, but she doesn't think she can ask Peter.
That's a lot to digest, and it's pretty common. It's a pretty common storyline, unfortunately, because one, let's unpack Peter. Red flags. What should be the first red flag Myra should pay attention to?
Well, she's clearly paying attention to something, right? She's concerned. I'm concerned that she doesn't have a ready professional to call when something in her circumstances changed. I mean, she's lived this way alone with just her neighbor for company for a long time. And here's a new person who's come into her home. And I guess she recognizes him. I guess she knows him well enough to know that he is, in fact, her nephew. And now he's living at her home. He's being unobtrusive. She's still doing what she does every day. But what's really going on? And what is Peter's real plan? And he doesn't know? What happens when this rolls out? Another 6 months? Another year? What happens?
Well, there's an elder abuse case study going to happen.
Well, maybe. I mean, at this moment, I don't know that Myra or Peter would believe that this is abusive, but he hasn't offered to pay rent. He hasn't made a plan. He didn't leave when she asked him to, right? She gave him a deadline and he hasn't left yet. And occasionally he drives her car. And what freaks me out as a professional trustee is the liability of having someone else drive the car. And Myra has some other issues here that we really need to look at, right? Because she doesn't have a plan herself.
So this is a probate.
Oh, yeah. If Myra dies, or worse, Myra gets really sick, Peter doesn't have any authority on any of her accounts or to pay the bills or to take care of anything. She doesn't really trust him to do those things right now anyway. So then what happens? What's the actual logistics of what's going to happen?
Well, Myra falls. She's unconscious. Peter calls 911. She's taken to the hospital.
And he identifies himself as her kin. And one of the problems with that is he might be her relative, but she hasn't talked to him about her desires, her wants, how this should work. Maybe she doesn't want to be kept alive. Maybe she does. But without him actually being the person she trusts, are they having those conversations? It doesn't feel like it in this case study. That's a concern.
So step one, let's say Myra wants to be proactive. First of all, we don't even have a trust. So it's the titling and that situation. So first steps.
First steps.
They said financial first steps.
Okay. Well, first, as Walter has passed away and she still has the original will, typically the will gets lodged with the county in which someone dies. It becomes public record. And that's why we have this suspicion here that, nothing's been changed or updated, right? So Myra doesn't really have authority on anything. So I would say the first thing Myra needs to do, even before she goes to a financial advisor, is to find an estate planning attorney. In fact, if I were Myra, I might ask Beth if she knows anyone I could talk to. And I might want to tell Beth what I'm worried about. I'm concerned that Peter's overstaying his welcome. And I'm a little afraid. And I don't want to tell him to get out because I don't know if he has anywhere to go. But at least talking with a second person allows you to get some perspective, maybe some objectivity to kind of explore. So how do you feel about Peter staying in your house? What's going on for you? What are you concerned about? And then let's get Myra to an estate planning attorney.
Well, that's planned for this. So
Right.
we want to get her, maybe her friend has an estate planning attorney.
Okay.
So that would be step one. We're planning we need to start that trust document to get the
Right.
house into the Myra trust.
Right. And not only do we need a trust document to deal with the house, there may be other assets, Walter's pension account, Walter's IRA. Walter might have had some money set aside or a savings account. Maybe both he and Myra are on that account, maybe not. So somebody has to become Walter's executor. So that's one set of one job that needs to be done.
So Myra needs to become that administrator for her husband.
If she's the right fit, we're not really sure about Myra's judgment. We're not really sure about how much moxie she has. We're not really sure how she's keeping the house or taking care of herself. So my hope is that with the right estate planning attorney, some of those questions get asked. What are Myra's needs? And maybe the attorney, depending on Myra's assets and her situation, might recommend someone, not Peter, be the trustee and executor. Is Myra able to do the job now? She gets to have those jobs. If she's not able to do that, she never has to be trustee of her own trust. Someone else with experience and a system in place can do that for her.
So that's always, the attorney will plan for that part of it. Always what we see so much is Myra may not be in the best health physically, and she needs some support. Who's watching over her meds? Who's watching over her ability to drive?
Right.
How do we plan for that?
Yeah, that's a big challenge, especially for someone who's been alone and they have certain habits and certain routines. And we want to respect what is normal for someone. But at the same time, would Myra be willing to have a professional trustee, let's say, ask some of those questions, or even bring in a care manager who is especially trained to deal with the psychosocial, medical, safety issues for someone in their own home? What we don't know in this particular case study is how Myra is living. Is her bedroom on the second floor? Is she doing her own laundry? Is she skipping doing laundry because the basket is too heavy? There's a lot of life details that it's really great. And if you're listening, I want to invite you to kind of think about your daily routine, the things that might be getting heavy, the things that are really important that feel like home, because that's part of what we're talking about too. Can Myra stay in her own home alone, safely, with a little bit of help? Maybe she needs a caregiver once or twice a week to help with the laundry, maybe to prepare meals for the week. We don't know what Myra needs yet, but those are the kinds of things that would be really great to explore and might feel kind of invasive. But at the same time, What's your expectation for living in your home alone for the rest of your life?
Well, we all know most people want to stay in their home as long as possible.
Sure.
So can we change this and give Peter can the attorney address Peter and say, hey, this is what you're going to do, or otherwise you need to leave?
Well, again, we're back to Myra being at choice. We're back to Myra deciding how she wants this to go. And having an attorney is a very empowering thing. I don't have to be the bad guy. I can ask the attorney to write the letter to tell Peter it's time for him to go. Or maybe she and Peter get very close. We've read plenty of fictional stories about how this relationship could grow. It'd be wonderful. And in real life, this might really work, right? Where Peter becomes her person. But now Peter is answerable not just to Myra. There may be certain procedural things he needs to do as her person that he didn't think of before and Myra didn't know. Like as an example, let's say Peter becomes the one responsible for paying Myra's bills. Well, now Peter has to produce an accounting. He has to show all the transactions. Is he going to be compensated? Is he compensated enough by living at the house? Well, it has a value. As a matter of fact, the IRS looks at free rent as a gift. So what is rent valued at living at Myra's house? And if he's not going to pay it, or he's not going to participate in this plan, or he's not someone that she really trusts, okay, well, then we have to make some changes.
We don't know, and this is what we read right now, where Myra wants her assets to go upon her passing. So is Peter, again, if he gets close, is Peter the one that inherits the home and the assets, or does she have I want to give it to a charitable institution? And then Peter, he gets 6 months to, all of those, the plan for this.
Right. I mean, okay, you may not have some random family member that's just going to move into your house, right?
But it happens.
But it happens. And one of the reasons why we advocate for having an estate plan that may not specify this situation, but having one at all means you have someone to call when your life changes like this. Myra, in this example, doesn't have anyone to call and say, my nephew Peter just showed up and he's in my house and he's been here for 2 months and he hasn't offered to pay rent. What do I do? And I want to encourage everyone to develop a few relationships where they feel at least confident enough to say, hey, Ron, this thing in my life just changed. What do I do about it?
Well, so let's getting back to plan for this. Myra, that's under the assumption that she has good health and she's planning on living a little while longer and she enjoys having Peter there. My biggest concern, my biggest red flag is financial. Peter doesn't have a job. Peter shows up. We don't know if Peter has children. What plan for this in terms of there are financial firewalls?
Well, as I recall, he is offering to pay for groceries occasionally, and he might be running errands for her. But it's time to formalize this relationship. How many hours is Peter working for Myra? Or is he? And if she's not going to be CEO of her own life and her own house, who is? So if I were to talk to Myra, or if she were to ask me the question, I would say first, what would you like to have happen? Because this is really about what you want. And if you're not feeling safe or comfortable, let's take steps to tell Peter it's time for him to go. You gave him a safe place for a couple of months and he needs to leave. But then we need to have a plan that follows up in terms of managing your life and deciding how you want things to go later. And that's a challenge. It might be more than one conversation.
So overall, we have a current situation. We have a situation where Myra, whose husband's passed away several years ago. It's entitled in community property with right of survivorship.
At least in California.
At least in California. So it would talk about probate a little bit if literally nothing gets done.
So let's say Myra passes away and it's sad and it's tragic and she died in her own home. But now that home has to be devised. Somehow it needs to go to someone. Well, is Peter really her only relative? And in a court, in order to transfer title and so on, there may be a search for other heirs. There may actually be a vendor hired to do that search. And there's probably a number of other things. But here's my big worry. How long can Peter be there with his computer skills and just pay the bills so the lights stay on and never tell anyone? Well, you don't want to keep a dead body in the house. I understand the awkwardness of that. But let's say 911 gets called, right? She died of natural causes. There's no foul play or anything like that. Who are you, Peter? Somebody he says, well, I'm her nephew. I've been staying for a while helping her out, right? And then the body's gone and he's left alone in the house. Will there be a probate?
Somebody has to file it.
Somebody has to file it. Somebody has to say, this isn't right. What's going on? Beth might have some questions, but Beth has also not been empowered. So I get it that we think of estate planning as just for the wealthy or somebody else, not me. We think about it that way. But when you look at this, Myra doesn't have a lot, but what she has is hers. And if she doesn't intentionally choose where it goes, then what happens? And at some point, Peter might be able to file some documents with her death certificate, but somebody's going to catch on that he doesn't have the power to do that. Would he present himself as Walter? Somewhere there's a death certificate for Walter. So we're looking at potential identity theft. We're looking at camping out in a house that's available, however long that lasts.
Call him a squatter.
Yeah. And there isn't anyone to call the realtor to sell the house or to take this to court or make sure that everything is done legally and properly.
So that is really planned for this. This is what really we're advocating. If this resonates with you, I mean, this is not, the son has moved. This is a nephew. The son has moved back in, the divorce. He has children, his second or third marriage. He may have a drug addiction. He may have an alcohol, whatever the case may be, we invite you to submit your story to us so that we can address these for you personally.
Well, we're going to share them on the show, and we're not promising at this time that we're going to respond to each question put in, but we want to hear your story. We really want to know how we can help. And if you have an interesting story about something that you've heard of directly or that has affected you, visit planforthis.com and let us know about it. And we'll have a way for you to sign up with us and be a Plan fan and share your story.
Be honest and be direct with us. We want to really help. This is what we're all about. Marguerite and I have had this passion for 20 plus years because the number of people that have an effective estate plan in the United States is minimal.
It's too few. We've heard that it's a third of adult Americans have an estate plan, and there have been some studies about that. And I think part of it is that we're afraid to talk about these kinds of things. But if Myra could talk to an estate planning attorney, if she could make a plan for herself, it would give her a little more confidence. It would give her a little more to be able to say, hey, Peter, you can stay for a little while, but then you have to go.
And the people that we've all seen, the burden that they place on themselves is unnecessary. This is the way to unburden yourself and be honest so that you will have a better life.
Yeah, that's what we wish for everyone.
Because you're unburdening yourself of this angst that what happens, what I didn't plan, and life is going to happen.
Yes, and an estate plan is really a whole set of what ifs. I like people to think of if this, then that. If something like this happens, this is what I want to have happen. But you need to build a team for people to carry out your wishes. And you also need to have a bit of trust of someone so that you can say, this person has moved in and I don't know what to do. And that's really what we're talking about, building that community around yourself. You can keep your independence. Absolutely. So thank you very much, Ron. I think this is really great.
Thank you.
Independent Trustee Alliance is a proud nonprofit sponsor of Plan for This. If you are considering serving as a trustee, please visit trusteealliance.com to learn more about this complex and sometimes overwhelming job. trusteealliance.com. Plan for This thanks the Estate Sale Warehouse for all their amazing service and support. Entire home cleanouts, inventory, appraisal, auctions, sale of fine art and classic cars. Learn more at estatesalewarehouse.com.
Up next is our Plan Fan submitted question. If you would like to submit your question, please go to planforthis.com. So the submitted question today, Marguerite, is my father recently passed and had a trust and will, but after a 23andMe swab, it turns out I have another sibling.
Oh.
I never met that person and they are not in Dad's will. Do I have a need to include them legally?
So I can't give you legal advice, but I would say the first call I would make is to my estate planning attorney. If you're serving as Dad's trustee, or you're just a beneficiary of your dad's and you have this information, I think you need to share it with the estate planning attorney who's assisting with the trust administration. There's a couple of things here. One, maybe in your dad's other papers and so on, he may have confessed to this relationship and may have also devised some other instruction about it. Like, I purposefully did not include this person in my documents. Maybe your dad forgot about it or thought it didn't apply to him. So we don't know those things, but it may end up having to go to court to have it figured out. Does that person deserve to be notified? Potentially, yes. And that's really why you need to have an attorney involved. And the rules in your state may be a little different than they are in California. But ideally in California, we have a 120-day waiting period. So for instance, before distributions are made after someone dies.
Distributions
of the assets, of cash, of writing checks, any of those might be considered a distribution. Even his personal property. It depends on the situation in that particular case. However, in the law, it basically says there's a 120-day waiting period before any checks are written or money goes out. Why? Because this kind of discovery can happen. Because there might be a beneficiary who is presumed missing. There might be other people who need to know that this person died because they're creditors and they want to be paid whatever the gentleman who passed away owes them. So estate administration takes a while, and there's a reason. And wow, that's a fascinating problem.
Well, so just to clarify, when you say writing checks or distribution, that's different, just so the listener and viewer can understand, that's different than just making sure Dad's bills are being paid and the mortgage is being paid and the lights stay on or things like that.
Right. So if this is working smoothly and the trustee has accepted their job, their position, they are marshaling assets. That means that they're going to that financial institution, they're going to that bank and presenting themselves with their own identification, with the documents that give them authority, and then they technically become the owner of that account as trustee of the trust. For assets that are not in the trust, let's say this father had an IRA, that's not owned by the trust. Maybe the trust is a beneficiary on that IRA account, and there's special language in the trust to deal with it. This is one of the reasons why we advocate so strongly about just get the plan done, because you're going to update your plan from time to time depending on who you love and what you have and where it is and that kind of thing. So the point I want to make here is that trust administration means, yes, we're identifying what bills need to be paid. Oh, the mortgage hasn't been paid yet this month. Or look, there's an auto pay out of the bank, but there's only so much cash to pay 1 month's worth of bills. Where do we get more funds to make sure that these bills continue to be paid until we sell the house or until we make some other decision about it?
Let's take it one step further for the audience. I have an unknown sibling. That sibling, unknown sibling, has passed away, but has children. I mean, how deep do you go where you would have to notify a kid of somebody who has some common blood?
Well, again, it depends on what the document says, right? So There's certain language in the trust that might say that if this person is dead, then his descendants get to inherit. And if none of them are available, then maybe a charity has been selected to inherit. So that's another part of planning for all those what ifs. If my brother's not alive when I die, I want his children to inherit. You can say that in your trust document, but you also still need to have a couple of what ifs. There are no survivors in your family, then what happens? And that's why some trust documents are 40 or 50 pages long.
So if you have a question, comment, story, please submit it to planforthis.com.
And as you heard today, an estate plan can help prepare you for the unexpected. Speaking of which, hey, Will Smith, will you be ready when life asks, did you plan for this?
Money management and legacy. Will you be ready for life's decree?